For this project, we're going to be making tie-dye mandalas. So we're going to need fabric dye of various colors. I would recommend using Ritz liquid ones because you don't have to mix it with water. It's already pre-mixed for you. I would also recommend getting any tiny little cups. You could also use these little containers that have a lid because then you can save your dye that you didn't end up using. You can also use rubber bands or yarn. You're gonna need pipettes or water squirters. These, I would really recommend these, but if you don't have these, you can also use a spoon or just pour or dip your fabric into the dye. I would also recommend getting a cardboard box or a cardboard piece and using it on your surface so you don't stain it. And then lastly, we will be cutting or using any pieces of fabric that you may have at home, and make sure it's plain white fabric, that way we get better results. And lastly, you will be using water. First thing I'm going to do is prepare my paints or my dyes so then I have them ready for when I need them and I don't have to be rushing later. So I'm going to first begin by setting up my little trays. As you saw, I have 4 colors, so I only need 4 little cups. Recommend shaking your bottle before to get all the pigments from the bottom. Shake, 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 and then pour a small amount into your little cup. And then repeat this with the other colors. Shake, shake and pour, shake and pour. You don't need a lot, as I said. You only need a little tiny amount. As you can see, I'm only using a small amount. And I would really recommend using gloves because you do not want your hands to be stained. Okay. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do is take my water, and I'm only going to pour in a small amount just to dilute it, and I can have more dye instead of using up the saturated and concentrated version of it. So what we're going to first start off by doing is that we're going to take one piece, and then you are going to fold it at one corner. All right, and then we are going to take this corner and fold it in. Okay, and then we will turn it and fold it again. Okay, so we're kind of making a paper plane with fabric. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to take the tip of my fabric and I'm going to wrap it with my rubber band. Then I'm going to take my rubber band, another rubber band, and then do it on another section. So just lower it a little bit down. And we don't necessarily want that to happen. We want there to be a separation between our dye and our color. So that's why we decided to use the rubber band, because it will not allow the fabric to soak into the yarn, thus staining our fabric in that section. So again, I made another area where I wanted the rubber bands to be, and then at the end I'm just going to take 2 rubber bands and put them at opposing sides. So take a rubber band or string, and we're going to do it at this corner. And it starts to get a little bit harder once you're losing area or like surface area for your rubber band to grab, but just make sure you do your best. Okay, and there's our little piece of fabric. So now you can start dyeing. So like I said, I would recommend getting a spoon for each single one, a squirter so you can squirt into every single part depending on how big your fabric is, or these little droppers and pipettes. I'm going to use one for every single color. So I'm going to start with the lightest and then go into the darkest colors, okay? Let me just move them around so I have them in that order and I don't mess it up later. So I'm going to start with my yellow, and I want this section to be yellow, so I'm just going to dye this section. You can also wet your fabric beforehand to allow for it to soak easier. Okay, so we're going to first start by rubbing it in and then pressing it in with your fingers to make sure that it's fully saturated. And like I said, if you start off with the lightest color first, you will prevent bleeding later on when you're rubbing the dye in. Okay, so I did this section yellow, and for this one, let's say I want the tip to be yellow. So I'm just gonna drop a few dots and press it in, drop a few dots, and then press it in. Just let the fabric soak up your dye. Okay, and make sure that it fully penetrates to the center. Since we made a lot of folds, you want this dye to go all the way deep into your fabric. So we're going to start just soaking it in. And once you've already pressed it in this way, it's just going to start absorbing it on its own. Okay. And then let me just repeat that on this other one on a different section. Okay, and then we're going to go on to the next color. And then the final color is my blue. Leave it to dry for a bit and then come back and cut the rubber bands and you will see your final product. So for the final steps, we will be doing the final reveal, removing our rubber bands. You can take them off whole or cut them, whatever you decide. And then, as I said, the reveal. We will pull it apart, okay? And we have created a half mandala or a quarter of a mandala. And you can make more of these and make many of them, okay? So this is a quarter of a mandala, and then this one will be an entire mandala. Okay, so depending on the fold you decide to use, these will be your final products. You just leave them to dry, then rinse them to remove any final pigments, and then wash them in the machine.